I'd like to introduce you to Leslie. Now, Leslie runs a medium-sized business that collects and organizes data for the hospitality industry. And she needs to make this data available to her clients all over the world. So her company has decided to create an application that will make their data available over the internet. Now, Leslie and her leadership team sat down one day to plan this new application, and they realized they needed a lot of computing infrastructure, things like servers and network-connected disks, all kinds of networking equipment. They needed server racks, lots of things. They also discovered that they needed a pretty large IT staff to manage all of this infrastructure and to troubleshoot and fix any problems that might pop up. Now, after running all the numbers, they discovered that this application was going to cost them approximately $1.1 million per year. Now, once they finished paying off the infrastructure costs, that price is going to drop a little bit, but not for long because they have to keep upgrading equipment and replacing equipment as needed. So as you can tell from this picture, after hearing this news, Leslie could do nothing other than just take a seat and frown. And it seemed that there wasn't any way they'd ever be able to release this application. Now that's when Amy, one of Leslie's most trusted advisors, spoke up. Amy told Leslie that she had just taken a course on getting started with Microsoft Azure, and she had a better idea for the application. Amy presents her idea of hosting the application in Azure using cloud services. And by using the cloud, Amy explains that they can pay only for what they use, and that keeps their costs way lower. In fact, the cost savings alone should make it obvious that using the cloud is the best choice, but cost savings is only the tip of the iceberg. By using the cloud, they can also easily add more computers, or disk space, or networking capacity. If things go as planned, they hope to add many more customers, and as they do, they can easily adapt. And if they need more power due to having a lot more users, they can easily add that as well. And they can do it quickly. They can do it reliably. Amy also explains that the application is likely to have periods where usage drops down or maybe where usage even goes way up. And when that happens, the cloud makes it easy to adjust using a process called scaling. They can easily scale up to add more power. They can scale back down when that power is no longer needed. They can scale out to add more computers or other resources when they need to, and then they can scale back in to save money when those resources aren't needed. Another benefit Amy points out is the fact that the cloud provides turnkey features. They can add some really powerful functionality to their application simply by turning them on. So, for example, if they want to allow their customers to authenticate to the application using their Microsoft account or another account that they already have, they can easily do that without having to hire developers or writing a custom solution. It really seems too good to be true. Not only can they save a ton of money by using the cloud, but they also get a lot of additional functionality. And they wouldn't even have that functionality on premises without raising the cost of the application a lot. So guess what? All these features Amy pointed out, they round out our definition of cloud computing. And it's what makes the cloud so popular today. Now, we're going to look at a lot of these features in the many demos that I'm going to show you in this course. But before we do that, let's talk about the different types of clouds and cloud services. Let's talk about the different types of cloud services. Now, in a lot of cases, you can use different types of cloud services for the same type of thing, but there are advantages and disadvantages to each type. So understanding these types of cloud services can be a big help. Let's start with infrastructure as a service, or what's commonly called IaaS. The infrastructure in IaaS refers to computers, networks, disks, memory, all of that type of stuff, and it's in the cloud. Now, in an IaaS service, the cloud provider, which is Microsoft in the case of Azure, provides this infrastructure to you as a service. You don't have to buy the computers or any of that other infrastructure. You simply pay a small cost to the cloud provider to make that infrastructure available to you. And because of that, using IaaS is a great way to limit your costs because you only have to pay for what you need. When you use an IaaS service, you have the most control and flexibility because the only thing provided by the cloud provider is the infrastructure. You provide the operating system that runs on the computers. You have to keep that operating system updated. You have to configure the network and all of that kind of thing. So IaaS does give you a lot of flexibility, but it also means that you have the greatest amount of responsibility compared to the other cloud service types. When you use the cloud, you share responsibility with the cloud provider, and how much of that responsibility rests on your shoulders versus the cloud provider is dependent on the type of cloud service you choose. IaaS has the most responsibility for you out of the 3 cloud service types. An example of an IaaS service in Azure is Azure Virtual Machines, a service that provides virtual machines for either Windows or Linux. And we're going to look at Azure Virtual Machines a little bit later in this course. The next service type we'll look at is called Platform as a Service, or PaaS. Now, a PaaS service is a hosted platform in the cloud. It consists not only of the infrastructure that we just talked about, but also specialized software from the cloud provider that runs on that infrastructure. When you're using a PaaS service, you get the operating system and the underlying platform from the cloud provider, but you still have to provide the application that runs on that platform. Because the platform is provided by the cloud provider, you have less control and flexibility when you're using a PaaS service. However, you also have less responsibility. In Azure, an example of a PaaS service is Azure App Service, a service that hosts websites and other applications that can be accessed using a web address like the one you might use in a web browser. Now, finally, we have Software as a Service, or SaaS. And a SaaS service is software or a service that's hosted in the cloud. SaaS services are probably the most common type of cloud service. In fact, a lot of people use SaaS services without even realizing it. So, for example, do you use Outlook.com or Gmail? Those are SaaS services. What about watching movies on Netflix? SaaS service. There are a ton of SaaS services that we use just about every day. SaaS services allow easy access from almost any device because they're usually accessed either over a website or from an app that uses the same underlying technology as a website. When you use a SaaS service, you have very little to no control over the service, and you also have almost no responsibility, or maybe even no responsibility at all. Now, as I mentioned, an example of a SaaS service is Outlook.com, but there are tons of them. So those are the 3 types of cloud services. Now, let's talk about the 3 different types of clouds, starting with the public cloud. Now, if you've gone out to the Azure portal and you've messed around at all with Azure, you're using the public cloud. And the public cloud is often referred to as a multi-tenant cloud or a multi-tenant environment. And that just means that the public cloud is used by many different people and companies. And these people and companies all share some of the same components of the public cloud. So, for example, your networking traffic on the public cloud travels over the same networking infrastructure as other people's and other companies' network traffic because you share that infrastructure with everyone else that's using the public cloud. Of the 3 different cloud types, the public cloud is the easiest to adopt. And as I explain the other cloud types, you'll see why that's true. The public cloud is also the least expensive because you don't have to buy anything up front. The public cloud is the most feature-rich option, and it provides all of the features and functionality that the cloud provider offers. And finally, the public cloud has the least overhead. You don't need a large IT staff. You don't have to invest in infrastructure. None of those things are required with the public cloud. Now, an example of the public cloud is, you guessed it, Microsoft Azure. So what about the private cloud? The private cloud is often referred to as a single tenant environment. And that's because a private cloud is just that. It's private. It's used only by a single company. And private clouds are often used when privacy is a requirement. Private clouds can be on premises, or they can be hosted by a third-party provider. And whether you host it on premises or with a third party, you have to purchase all of the infrastructure the cloud runs on. That means private clouds can be expensive, and there's higher overhead because you own all the infrastructure. It also means that a private cloud could be more difficult to troubleshoot and maintain because of that added complexity. Microsoft offers a private cloud solution called Azure Stack, and it offers many of the same services and features of the Azure public cloud. Now, the third type of cloud is the hybrid cloud, and this is probably the most common real-world usage of the cloud. A hybrid cloud is a mix of the public and the private cloud. And that makes the hybrid cloud great for lift and shift scenarios where you want to easily move an application from on-premises to the cloud. And when you use the hybrid cloud, you can choose to leave some systems on-premises, maybe because those systems don't support some of the modern features of the public cloud, and you connect those legacy systems to the cloud using network features that are offered by the cloud provider. It is important to note, however, that connecting on-premises systems to the cloud can be complex, can be complicated, can be difficult to configure and troubleshoot and that type of thing. An example of a hybrid cloud scenario might be Microsoft Azure connecting to a legacy database server that's on premises. Okay, we've covered some of the general cloud concepts. I think it's time we get into some Azure-specific information that can help you to understand how Microsoft has implemented some of the concepts that we've talked about up to this point. And we're going to get started on that in the next lesson.